been a day. How you doing, guys? Dr. Nathan Thompson here with Exemplify Health Center, your Wellness Way affiliate right here in Yorkville, Illinois. Happy Monday evening. Apologize coming live just a little bit late. It's been a pretty crazy day today for many reasons, but we're going to do an awesome live today. All right. So I get this question a lot. This has to do with inflammation. Yes, it has to do with your immune system. I'm going to tie it all in. But I always ask this question. In fact, this question was asked today. And someone said, Dr. Nate, what kind of bed do you recommend? Because I'm waking up sore and I'm waking up stiff. And it must be my bed, okay? And I'm going to tell you something. Actually, being a chiropractor by trade, we tend to really promote the use of beds and orthotics and braces and things like that aren't really the real reason why you're waking up stiff, sore, and inflamed. I'm going to go over a bigger reason as well. Now, for that individual that asked that question today, I said, hey, watch this live video tonight, and this will probably give you a little bit better perspective as to, is it really your bed or is it something else, okay? Now, I just full disclosure, if you really want to know what bed I recommend, avocado green mattress, it's non-toxic. So I always say non-toxic first. And it's a memory foam. But guys, this whole idea behind trying to find this magical bed that's going to take away all your problems, I'm going to show you why you're going down the wrong rabbit hole. So guys, there's so many times where we're trying to figure out, rather than get to the real reason why it is, we're trying to blame our bed, we're trying to blame the fact that we have flat feet, we're trying to blame that we need these special orthotics. And yes, we actually do those for some people, not a whole lot. But there's other things that we would rather have them do besides going down the rabbit hole of trying to get a new mattress or orthotics or some kind of brace or something like that, and really try to get to the real reason why a specific area is actually inflamed, okay? So if you're watching right now, guys, say hello, and please share this video, because we're going to talk about, is it really your bed or is it actually something else? Now, let me help you make a little bit of sense of this, of why I don't think that it's your bed. Now, the reason why people ask that question a lot is it, what's going on? Do I need to get a new bed or whatever? Is because people are, in fact, waking up, they're stiff, they're waking up inflamed, or they're waking up and they hurt, and they think it's just because they don't have enough support from the mattress. I'm like, hey, if you went back 1,000 years, they literally just slept on a straw mat, or they slept on the floor, and they didn't complain about it. And one of the reasons why is because they weren't so doggone inflamed. But this is a 21st century problem of being chronically inflamed, okay? And this will make sense when I go over this in just a second. So I'm going to make a bold statement right now. A bold statement that I'm making is that most health issues are going to involve either mental stress, or they're going to involve chronic inflammation, or maybe both, okay? Now let me explain that, because I was talking to a new patient today, and she was having a lot of problems with her menstrual cycle, having some problems conceiving. We haven't measured her hormones or anything like that, but one of her main complaints was actually anxiety. And if you are having problems with anxiety due to a high level of mental stress, that is going to absolutely mess up. It can mess up the thyroid, and also can mess up your menstrual cycle, your progesterone levels, and things like that, only because in the Wellness Way, we actually understand hormone pathways and what converts into what. But the other thing that you have to also address is you have to address your chronic inflammatory triggers, whether they're going to be physical, whether they're going to be mental, or whether they're going to be chemical. It may be one, it may be two, it may be all three, and in fact, many times it is all three. All right, and that's why we actually are always addressing the physical frame, the structural frame, the spine in relation to the nerve system. But this will help you make a whole lot of sense, especially if you're waking up in the morning and you're feeling very stiff, and if you're feeling really inflamed, okay? Now watch, okay? There's two hormones that I'm talking about, the immune system, and then I'm talking about this stress hormone that's known as cortisol. Guys, if you have looked at a lot of things in medicine, actually is the application of a cortisol derivative that they want to put inside of your body. And the reason why they want to do that is because cortisol, cortisone, hydrocortisone, things like that, prednisone, those derivatives of cortisol are extremely anti-inflammatory. So they're anti-inflammatory, which means they're going to lower the immune system response. So this is really interesting. So when you look at when your cortisol levels are the highest and when they're at the lowest, this is going to understand why you may be waking up very sore or very inflamed. So just remember this, because I'm going to talk about your cortisol rhythm, but I also want you to understand this. As the immune system goes up, for example, let's say you get COVID, the immune system goes up because it needs to handle that infection. I want you to think of how you feel, okay? I want you to think of how you feel. And the number one thing that people say is, I feel tired, I feel fatigued, and the reason why is that if we took and measured your cortisol levels in the blood while you had COVID, your cortisol levels would be very low. And the reason why this happens is because it's a response to having inflammation. When you have inflammation, cortisol actually goes down, which is why so many people who come in who are so chronically inflamed, why they feel so tired, why they feel so fatigued, and they're running to trying to say, well, maybe I in fact have some kind of adrenal fatigue or something like that. Your adrenals aren't fatigued. Your adrenals are responding to inflammation, okay? So when you're fighting an infection or something that's involving inflammation, cortisol goes down and you're going to be very fatigued. Now, the other thing is also true. Cortisol is very high. Let's say you have a high amount of mental stress that's going on. You're going to notice that the immune system goes down, which is why when people say, oh, I've been so stressed out, I've been so mentally stressed, and that caused my immune system to tank, which then is going to lead you more susceptible to having things like viral infections, bacterial infections, and things like that. So hopefully, guys, that makes sense. Now, this is why the body never makes a mistake, because people always think that you're trying to manipulate it. The body doesn't know what it's doing, but the body is beautiful. It will never hurt you. It will never try to destroy you. It is merely trying to adapt to its environment. So if you think that a bear, for example, a bear is chasing you and you're going to become that bear's lunch if you don't run away as quickly as possible, well, one of the things that's going to happen is you're going to get a spike in adrenaline. Yes, that comes from the medulla of the adrenal glands on the inside, the neurological portion. You're going to get a release of adrenaline, and then that's that initial spike. And then within 10 or 15, 20 minutes, if you went into the blood, you would also see a significant spike in cortisol. Now, cortisol is extremely anti-inflammatory. So let's say the bear is running after you and you hit a rock and you sprain your ankle. At that point, you need that high amount of cortisol in order for that to be anti-inflammatory, so that you're not getting all swollen and painful on that ankle, so that you can continue to run away from the bear. So you don't want the ankle to go through an inflammatory process at that point. And it's a beautiful response from the body, because if the body is doing that, it's trying to get you out of that situation, and it can work on healing actually later. So when you look at this, guys, if you guys understand this, immune system goes up, cortisol energy goes down. Cortisol goes up, the immune system is going to go down. So I want you to think of this when you look at what's known as your circadian rhythm or this cortisol response and what it looks like throughout the day. This is a pretty basic graph. It's a little bit more in-depth than that or complex than that, but I want you guys just to see the whole point. So let's say you can measure cortisol. You can measure it in the blood. You can measure it in the saliva. You can also measure it in the urine. And in fact, when we're measuring like a 4.1234 cortisol, we're usually doing it in the urine, but you can also take it from saliva cortisol as well. So when you look at this, this is starting at 3 o'clock in the morning. So 3 o'clock in the morning, what I want you to see is you're going to see at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to see gradually these cortisol levels start to go up, and you're going to see that as it goes up, this is actually one of the things that gets you up in the morning. So one of the things that wakes you up, that gets you from sleep to being lucid, it's the cortisol. So as it continues to rise from 3 o'clock all the way up until about 9 to 10 o'clock, when it's actually should be at its highest, cortisol is at its highest. So I want you to think of that. If cortisol works in opposition to the immune system, if cortisol is actually at its highest at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 10 to 2, right around there, then the immune system is going to be, and inflammation is going to be at its lowest. So this is why typically, guys, we have the highest energy, or we should, the highest energy and the less body aches and body pains taking place at that point. Now, what's supposed to happen after that is that it's supposed to gradually taper off that cortisol level so that it's at its lowest when you're actually supposed to go to bed. So cortisol goes down, and this is what's beautiful. It allows you to be able to go to sleep. It allows you to be able to rest. And at that point, the immune system is actually going to start picking up. This is why everyone says that sleep is important, but not one person can actually say, why is sleep important? They know it's important, but this is the reason why, is because cortisol is what allows you to go to sleep, but the immune system then starts to pick up. So let me ask you a question. If the immune system is picking up at night, then isn't it important to be able to sleep in order for proper recovery? I'm going to show you a hormone, why this is so important, and why in response to sleep, this hormone goes up, and most people think it's a sleep aid, but in reality what it is it's an antioxidant within the mitochondria of your cells. So as this goes down, inflammation is going to go up. So let's talk about your bed, okay? So inflammation is always going to be at the highest when cortisol is at its lowest, which means that while you're sleeping, inflammation will be at its highest. The immune system is doing its work in handling any kind of things that are immune system insults, things that are triggers to your immune system. So I want you to think of this, is that if you have already a lot of chronic inflammation, if you have a lot of chronic inflammation that's going on, your body is going to handle it at night. If you got a lot of chronic inflammation in your knee, it's going to handle it at night. If you have a lot of chronic inflammation in your lower back, handle it at night. Chronic inflammation in your neck, it's going to handle it at night. And this is why it's handling it at night, and you wake up in the morning and you feel like you got kicked in the back by a horse, or you got trampled by a horse. Kind of like what's happening in Canada right now. Jeez. Oh my goodness. My prayers for Canada if you guys are watching. And so you just feel like, but you want to assume that, well, maybe I am dealing with some inflammatory issues that are going on. But what we do instead is we jump to saying, oh my gosh, it must be my bed. It must be my bed. Guys, it most likely is not your bed. What is that you're just chronically inflamed, and as cortisol goes down, the immune system and the inflammatory response starts to go back up. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, guys, so pay attention, because not only do you have cortisol, but when you look at cortisol, you can actually see that cortisol and the hormone melatonin, which is produced by the pineal gland, work in opposition to one another. So if you look at cortisol and you can see cortisol starts to go up, look at your melatonin levels. So you look at the melatonin levels are at its lowest, but then after about 7 o'clock, melatonin levels go up and then cortisol levels go to their lowest. So if cortisol is low, melatonin actually starts to go up at night. And what's interesting is that really melatonin is not what helps you to go to sleep as much as it's the universal antioxidant. Melatonin is super important because what it does is it helps to repair. Specifically, what it helps to repair is the mitochondria, or the engines within the cell. And so basically when you're looking at this is that while you are sleeping, the immune system is going up, and so is repair in response to this hormone known as melatonin. Guys, this is why it's so important that if you aren't getting enough sleep, you're not going to be getting enough recovery, and you're not going to be getting enough repair. This is also why so many people, if they're on these, their iPhones, if they're on the TVs, or have any kind of background light, this is why it is really important to wear blue light blocking glasses after about 7 o'clock to block the blue light so that melatonin production can actually start to rise. Now, you can actually see this, especially when people are starting to feel really beat up. So when they start to feel like really beat up, they feel really inflamed, one of the things I'll actually ask them is, hey, how much sleep are you getting, number one? And then number two, when are you going to sleep? So if someone says, I'm only sleeping 5 hours, I'm like, okay, well, when are you getting to 5 hours? Because there is a difference when it comes to recovery in melatonin of getting 5 hours of sleep from like 10 o'clock p.m. until 3 o'clock a.m. versus getting 5 hours of sleep from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. there's going to be a big difference in repair and recovery because of when melatonin is actually being released. This is why, guys, if you go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up at 10, you still feel lousy because basically when you look at this, you've missed out on a lot of your melatonin secretion from your pineal gland, which means that you're not going to be healing and you're not going to be recovering. Guys, you can even see this on a blood work because when we see people, for example, go ahead and just grab your basic blood work, which is known as a CMP. So a lot of times every year, doctors will run a CBC, complete blood count, and a CMP, meaning a complete metabolic panel. And when they're doing this complete metabolic profile or panel, they always are going to measure something known as blood urea nitrogen. As you see that blood urea nitrogen creeping up, that means that you're getting a lot of tissue damage and you're not getting a whole heck of a lot of repair. And you'll see that, and that's actually one of the indicators that we tell people, hey, you're not either sleeping enough, you need to start changing your sleep cycle, you just need to start improving the quality of your sleep or when you're going to sleep, and also they may need to take something like melatonin, not necessarily to fall asleep, but to help with repair, or take things that will help increase melatonin production. For example, something like Schisandra can do a wonderful job, and there's even foods that will increase melatonin production, like tart cherry juice. Doesn't taste like cherries, though, by the way. Okay, so look at this. This is recovery. This is allowing the immune system to go up, and that's why it's happening when you sleep. So guys, if you're waking up and you feel like, oh my gosh, I felt like I went through 15 rounds with Mike Tyson, then don't consider your bed, consider this right here. How inflamed are you, and how much work does the immune system need to do in order to bring tissue repair while you sleep? Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. Is number one, are you addressing your inflammatory triggers? You can see I made a mistake there. I'm sorry. For those of you who are teachers. So are you addressing your inflammatory triggers? Okay, so think about this. I got to say this, I got to stop right now because I have someone, Carrie Robertson, said hi from Ottawa, Canada. Carrie, I am absolutely honored that you're watching from Canada. I 100% support you. We are praying for everyone in Canada, but specifically in Ottawa, because I see what's going on, and it is absolutely a travesty, and it is a violation of human rights. Okay, can I say that on Facebook? I think I can, because pretty soon I'm going to be heading over to Truth Social anyway. All right. So what are your inflammatory triggers? Are you addressing those? Okay. So how do you address your inflammatory triggers? Okay. A great place to start, guys, is addressing foods. Those can be some big time inflammatory triggers. So are you addressing your food allergies? Have you actually gotten a food allergy test? And if you've gotten a food allergy test, do you realize that it's not just these are my foods, these are I can have, these are the ones I can't have, because it's a lot more in depth than that. It's the antibody response. It's the type of foods that you're having an inflammatory response to. Is there any kind of intestinal hyperpermeability? If there is, why? So there's so many other issues that you need to address when it comes to just your foods and just doing just a this for that approach. So what are your inflammatory triggers, and are you addressing them? And then number two, are you recovering well? What do you mean, Dr. Nate, by recovering? Well, let me talk to you, the people who love exercise. Let me talk to you specifically to the CrossFitters. I've happened to CrossFit for the last 11 years. Most of the people, the detractors, would say I should be dead by now and had 19 different surgeries. I've never had any kind of surgery, whatsoever. I'm still alive and I'm still kicking. But CrossFit is great, has its benefits, and it has its drawbacks if you don't know and don't understand the drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is you're putting your body through the ringer with things like squats, deadlifts, gymnastics, handstands, you name it. And so it's very high intensity, so it does have the capability to really start to beat up the body if you are not recovering very well. This is why the more that you're doing high intensity exercise, the more that you're doing like multi-joint type lifts, like deadlift, or doing squats that require a lot of adrenaline, that require a lot of recovery. There's a lot of muscles that get broken down during that process. You need to pay attention to your recovery. And one of the biggest things is that you need to pay attention to is how much you're sleeping and then when you're actually getting to sleep in order to get adequate melatonin for recovery. So are you recovering well? And in fact, the more that you are exercising, more things that you're doing like CrossFit, the more you actually should be sleeping. Now, I, for example, got so into it, I was doing it competitively. This was probably about 6 years ago, and I was literally working out 6 days a week, and I was also doing 2-a-days, doing a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of metabolic conditioning. I was in the best shape of my life, but I never felt more sore, more stiff, and every morning I woke up and I would crawl out of bed and say, I don't know how I'm going to be able to take on the day. So one of the things I was doing is I was still only sleeping about 5 to 6 hours when I should have been getting 8 to 9 hours. And it absolutely eventually just crushed me, where I just spent a whole entire year of all of my tissues and my joints just absolutely breaking down, feeling like, man, this is what 40 is supposed to feel like. And it wasn't. I was just literally overworked and I was under recovered. And a lot of it had to do with my cortisol levels and then also the melatonin levels. Guys, melatonin, this is actually why if you look at some of the quote unquote protocols that they do for COVID back a year ago or a year and a half ago, this is why some of the doctors actually included melatonin, because of how it actually would help the cells. So this is actually why if you do see melatonin as a quote-unquote COVID protocol, this is one of the reasons actually why. So are you addressing your inflammatory triggers? If you don't know them, then get on it and start addressing them. Physical, mental, chemical, and how are you recovering? What kind of quality of sleep? When are you going to sleep? How many hours are you actually sleeping? Are you able to actually sleep through the night? Are you waking up 2 to 3 times? Do you have sleep apnea? If you do, why? Figure that out. Because if you don't sleep appropriately, then it is very, very hard for your tissues to be able to heal. And the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to keep blaming your bed. And the only one's going to benefit is all of these mattress companies, all right? Like Sleep Number is going to make a killing off of you only because you refuse to listen to what I'm telling you right now, okay? So guys, just remember this. It's probably not your bed. It's the fact that you're inflamed and that you are under recovered. Now, someone asked the question, is it okay to take melatonin pills? Yeah, we'll recommend it. In fact, actually through detox, for example, a lot of times I'll recommend taking about 3 milligrams of melatonin. You don't have to necessarily take it at night, and you can take it in the morning too as well. And sometimes when people take exogenous melatonin, because remember it's a hormone, they might feel a little wired and jittery, and usually what I tell them is yeah, give it about 4 or 5 days of doing it. It'll let your body start to get used to it. But here's what's so interesting, guys, is that things that can cross the blood-brain barrier, like toxins, one of them actually can be mold. If that can cross the blood-brain barrier, this is why when you look at a person, for example, who are suffering terribly from mold, this is why they don't sleep well. This is why everything hurts. This is why literally everything starts breaking down, including the gastrointestinal system. You'll see it show up in the thyroid, in their kidneys. You'll see it in the lungs. You'll see it everywhere, and including they're at a higher risk of actually having cancer as well. So this is why, when melatonin levels are affected, people can get very, very, very sick. So can you take it exogenously? Yes, you can. But the true answer is to just be sleeping enough, all right? Just get sleep enough and get most of your sleep, from 9 o'clock to midnight is really your window of opportunity to really cash in on that melatonin as well. So it's probably not your bed, guys. It's just the fact that you're inflamed and that you're under recovered. And so it's not necessarily the bed. Also, I may make a shout out for, it's not your shoes. I could do a whole live on just shoes, guys. You don't need to be wearing the really super cushiony giant New Balance shoes or the Nike Monarchs, or I'm going to probably offend some people saying that. But guys, it's not even your shoes as well. If you looked at the type of shoes that I there's actually there's no cushioning in it. It's a very flat, stiff sole with no kind of incline, with about a 4 millimeter rise. I mean, that's it. And guys, since I've been changing my shoes, the fact that I had a lot of feet problems, Had to do, yes, structurally, but it was also a lot of it, I was just so inflamed and always having a lot of issues with plantar fasciitis and things like that. There's always a structural component. There's always a chemical component to it. And yes, there can always be a mental component to every single thing, which is why with the Wellness Way approach, this is why, guys, we are the best at what we do, because we're the only profession that is handling all three of those. And not only that, we're the only profession that can test in the way that we do. So guys, I know that right now, at least for the time being, at least for the next couple of weeks, we have actually had said no more new patients. Sorry, we really care that, about you. We know that you're struggling, but for our own staff and for myself, we have to take a little bit of a break from new patients. So I know a lot of people reach out. So guys, I'm always going to tell you is find a Wellness Way doctor in your area. I am booked for remote consults and phone consults for probably the next 3 to 4 months. But if you go to thewellnessway.com, you can go ahead and do a search and see if you can find a Wellness Way doctor that's close to you. And if you don't, go ahead and reach out to the corporate Wellness Way and see if they can put you in touch with the doctor who can do remote consults with you as well. So guys, I hope you guys have a great night. That's all I got for you, and we'll be jumping in. It appears I'll have maybe a little bit extra time coming up in the next couple of weeks and things like that. So if I have the opportunity to share with you some awesome clinical knowledge, I definitely will. So I might be going live with you guys a little bit more since I'll have just a little bit extra time on my hands. And so I hope you guys have a good night. I hope you have a great sleep tonight. And guys, as always, make sure that you please share this video with other people. Hopefully they'll see the clinical benefit of just getting enough sleep, and they'll understand that it's probably not their bed. So guys, be well. I hope you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.